Hi Yogi, it's Bri. In this video, we're going to look at dolphin and Pinchamayurasana or forearm balance. Dolphin and forearm balance always go hand in hand for me because dolphin, you have to take it in order to get into forearm balance. But at the same time, it's a really wonderful prep. And honestly, I find dolphin to be a lot more effective than forearm balance for the shoulders. Now, what I love about dolphin as well as forearm balance is that you're not only strengthening your shoulders because obviously you're putting weight on them, but you're also opening or lengthening some of the integral shoulder muscles at the same time. That said, it's only going to be beneficial in your body or your students' bodies if it's practiced correctly. And if it's not, then it can be really detrimental on the shoulder. I always ask my students, what do you think is harder, handstand or forearm balance? And there's always mixed opinions, but typically forearm balance would be noticed as more accessible because it's lower to the ground. But in fact, anatomically and physically, handstand with the arms extended is a lot easier for the human anatomy just because you have a straight arm. When you start to bend at the elbow, keeping external rotation becomes really challenging, especially if the anterior deltoid and the lats are tight. So, that said, one thing to really keep in mind is the shoulder girdle alignment when someone is practicing dolphin, as well as when you're teaching dolphin or forearm balance. So Virginie's going to come into dolphin, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Now, setting up for it is really important. You want your students to look at their foundation, their hands, and their forearms. Are they realistically in shoulders distance? And for Verge, you can see that she's actually setting up a bit too wide. Her elbows are a bit too wide, therefore it's causing internal rotation of the humerus. And she's actually doing a pretty good job here in dolphin of keeping a neutral humerus, but if she keeps the same position and she starts to go up into Pinchamayurasana or forearm balance, the pressure and weight of her body will send her humerus into internal rotation, possibly damaging the rotator cuff. So come on down to your knees. I always tell students to set up from their knees, cue their elbows in a little more narrow than their shoulders, and then here's the key, turn the hands out slightly. So the slight open hand allows for a little bit more space for external rotation of the arm bone. Okay, so now come on back, the upper arm bone. Come on back to dolphin. Now, it's the same thing that I would cue in handstand. It's the same thing I would cue in tabletop position. Firm the forearms in as you spread the shoulder blades wide. One more extra verbal cue that helps a lot with dolphin and pincha is to really press the inner wrist down towards the mat, because that pronation, that pressing the inner wrist down, encourages pronation of the forearms, which really helps with stabilizing. Okay, she's tired. Let's come on back when you're ready. So that's the shoulders. Now we want to really effectively stretch the lats in this position. And how we do this now, a lot of people who are really tight, they end up forward. So shoulders forward and then really rounded here because they're trying to straighten their legs. So what I always recommend is a little bend in the knees and then thinking about lifting the outer hips up and back so that they end up with the shoulders behind the line of the elbows, drawing the ribs and the navel in. And then if they want to begin to straighten the legs, they can do so by pressing the heels down, but still reaching the outer hips up and back. Take a child's pose. Great job. So all of that can happen just through your verbal cues. At the same time, a little bit of directional touching helps as well, especially if a student isn't so connected to their body just yet. But Verge is so you can actually see the things happening as I verbally cue them. Now, working into Pincha Mayurasana or forearm balance, if I'm working one-on-one with a student, which is the most helpful when you're teaching somebody an inversion, because you want to spot them, but you don't always have the opportunity to. So I'm going to show you how I verbally prep someone, how I cue them into it, and how I spot them. But then I'll also give you my verbal cues for a class setting as well. All right, so she's going to lift her gaze up, come onto her forearm, staying on her shins for now so that she can set up her elbows a bit more narrow than shoulders distance, just a tiny, because they're going to slide, and turn her hands out just a tad. Okay, now I want her to really feel the engagement while she's in this forearm tabletop. So I want her to pronate the forearms or press the inner wrist down as she firms the elbows in towards one another, but spreads the shoulder blades wide. So keep in mind, again, firming in with the elbows engages the pecs, and then spreading the shoulder blades wide helps to stabilize the shoulder by engaging serratus anterior. Now she's going to come into dolphin pose, lifting her knees up off the ground. I want to also cue that she's got a little bend in her knees and she's lifting the outer hips up and back, keeping the ribs and the navel in. Now she's going to walk her feet forward while pushing down through the elbows so her hips stay high. I'm standing at a diagonal, so I'm kind of straddling one hand. I take my hands over towards her hips as she lifts one leg up. Keeping my face out of the way, same thing as handstand. She bends into the standing leg knee and she descends the femur bone as she hops up to bring the hips over. And I'm spotting. How you feeling? Doing okay? Doing great. And it's the same thing as handstand. She's going to push down through her elbows instead of her hands, though. Draw the ribs and the navel in, squeeze the inner thighs, and squeeze the butt. Good. Come over just a little bit more with the legs. Ooh, and a bit of a back bend, but she's found her balancing point. Try to pike your butt over just a tad. You're there. Nice. And then come on down. Really strong. And I know that, so Verge does lots of martial arts and boxing, so I know that this is really tough for her. But we all do things that round our shoulders. We all do things that make us feel a bit tighter in the shoulders. And we're yoga teachers, so imagine how tight your students feel. Granted, you will have from time to time those students who are really flexible, but for the most part, students are going to find it really challenging to keep the correct alignment in Pincha Mayurasana. So I'm going to verbally cue without spotting, and this is going to be about her feeling the entrance because the transition is the hardest part. She doesn't need to hop that high, and I'll tell her that as well. So this is how I would cue coming into Pincha in a class setting where maybe I'm not there to spot everybody. So come into dolphin pose. Make sure that your elbows are a little more narrow than your shoulders and your hands are turned out slightly. In your dolphin, hug the forearms in, spread the shoulder blades wide, lifting your knees up off the ground. Keep pressing the outer hips up and back. Looking between your forearms, start to walk the feet in until your hips feel stacked over the shoulders. Make sure the shoulders don't go past the line of the elbows. Lift one leg up as you inhale. As you exhale, bend your standing leg knee and descend the femur bone, bringing the hips over just a tad. Hop as lightly as you can. It's really not about going all the way there. You're fine. Hop lighter. If you find that you hop so hard that you lose control, that means you need to slow that momentum down. Nice job, Verge. Okay, so talking to your students so that they're aware, but also being able to choose those succinct verbal cues so that they're not holding a prep position too long and tiring their arms out like I did just then. Try it out. Hopefully it's helpful for you.